For over 40 years, Paul McCartney has never talked about how John Lennon's death really affected him. But when this heartbroken fan shared his story on The Tonight Show, Paul finally revealed the truth. The Tonight Show studio was alive with its signature Tuesday evening energy in Manhattan. The familiar blue and gold lighting created that warm, electric atmosphere that had made the show a late-night institution for decades. Paul McCartney sat comfortably across from Jimmy Fallon, both men engaged in what appeared to be a typical celebrity interview about his remarkable six-decade career and enduring musical legacy. The Roots had just finished their smooth musical transition, and the cameras were rolling hot. Jimmy's iconic curved desk gleamed under the professional studio lights, while the New York City skyline sparkled through the backdrop windows like a constellation of memories and timeless melodies. Paul looked every inch the living legend he had become. At 82, he still possessed that boyish charm that had captivated the world in the 1960s, though now tempered with the wisdom and gravitas that came from a lifetime of creating music that had touched billions of lives. Dressed in a perfectly tailored navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, his silver hair neatly styled, he radiated the kind of effortless confidence that only comes from knowing you've changed the world. "So, Paul," Jimmy said, his animated gestures punctuating every word, "you're still touring, still recording, still creating at 82. I mean, most people your age are thinking about retirement, and you're out there playing 3-hour concerts. What keeps you going?" Paul smiled with that trademark warmth that had endeared him to generations of fans. "You know, Jimmy, music has been my life for so long that I can't imagine doing anything else. When I'm on stage and I see 3 generations of families singing along to Hey Jude or Yesterday, it reminds me why I started doing this in the first place." The audience was clearly charmed by his enthusiasm and energy, several older fans in the front rows, nodding along with obvious admiration and nostalgia. And the new album, McCartney III Imagined, has been getting incredible reviews, Jimmy continued. "You're working with artists who are literally young enough to be your great-grandchildren. How does it feel to still be relevant to new generations?" Paul's eyes lit up with genuine excitement. "It's wonderful, really. Working with these young artists, they bring such fresh energy and perspective. They grew up with digital technology that I'm still learning about. But at the end of the day, a good song is a good song. That hasn't changed." The conversation was flowing naturally, touching on his latest collaborations, his upcoming tour dates, and the surreal experience of having created a body of work that had become the soundtrack to countless lives across multiple generations. "I have to ask," Jimmy said, leaning forward with the kind of reverence reserved for true legends. "When you look back at the Beatles, at everything you created with John, George, and Ringo, does it still feel real? I mean, you literally changed the world." Paul's expression became more thoughtful, more reflective. "It's extraordinary, isn't it? When we were young lads from Liverpool, we never imagined it would become what it did. We were just 4 friends who loved making music together. The fact that those songs are still bringing people joy. It's humbling." The studio audience was completely engaged, hanging on every word from one of the most important figures in popular music history. "And the songwriting partnership with John," Jimmy continued carefully, "that's become the stuff of legend. Lennon-McCartney is probably the most famous creative partnership in music history." Paul nodded, though for just a moment, something flickered across his expression, a shadow so brief that most people watching might have missed it entirely. John was special. We had this connection, this understanding when we wrote together. It was like we could read each other's minds. The audience appreciated his obvious affection for his late partner, many of the older fans clearly remembering the magic of that era. "You've created such an incredible legacy," Jimmy said warmly. "And you're still adding to it. That must feel pretty amazing." Paul smiled, though there was something deeper in his eyes now, something that spoke of experiences both wonderful and heartbreaking. "Music has given me everything, Jimmy. The joy, the friendships, the ability to connect with people all over the world. I've been incredibly fortunate." It was in this moment of reflection about legacy and the power of music that a voice from the audience cut through the studio atmosphere with the raw honesty and pain of someone who had been carrying a heavy burden for far too long. "Mr. McCartney?" Both Paul and Jimmy turned toward the sound. In the 5th row, slightly right of center, an older man in his late 60s was standing among the seated audience members, He had graying hair and kind eyes that held a depth of experience and loss. He wore a simple dark sweater and clutched what appeared to be a well-worn Beatles album in his trembling hands. "Yes, hello there," Paul responded immediately, his media training evident as he gave the man his complete attention. "What's your name?" "My name is Robert," the man replied, his voice carrying the weight of years and unspoken grief. "Robert Harrison from Boston. Robert from Boston," Paul repeated with a warm smile. "Lovely to meet you. What did you want to share?" Robert took a visible breath, and suddenly the energy in the studio shifted dramatically. The light-hearted conversation about music and legacy was about to become something much more personal, much more painful, much more profound. "I wanted to thank you for your music," Robert began, his voice steady despite the emotion clearly building behind his words. "But I also wanted to ask you something that I've been wondering about for 44 years. Paul's expression immediately became more serious, his performer's instincts recognizing that they were about to enter territory far more meaningful than typical late-night television. "Of course, Robert. What's on your mind?" Paul asked softly, his voice carrying the gentle compassion that had made him beloved beyond just his musical abilities. "In 1980, when John was killed," Robert said, and the words seemed to echo through the suddenly silent studio, "I lost my best friend too. Not to violence, but to cancer. We'd been friends since we were 7 years old. We grew up listening to the Beatles together, dreaming about being musicians, talking about girls, planning our futures." The studio fell completely silent. This was no longer entertainment. This was someone's deepest pain being shared with millions of people, someone's most private grief being laid bare under bright lights. "When I heard about John's death on the radio that December morning," Robert continued, tears beginning to form in his eyes, "I thought about you. I thought about what it must be like to lose not just a friend, but a creative partner, someone you'd shared the most important years of your life with." Paul sat frozen, clearly understanding that this conversation was about to touch something deeply personal and painful in ways he hadn't expected when he'd walked onto this stage tonight. "My friend David and I, we used to argue about which one of us was Paul and which one was John," Robert said, a small smile crossing his face despite his tears. "We thought we'd grow old together, keep making music together, keep being friends forever." The weight of his words settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something that transcended entertainment, something that touched the very core of human friendship and loss. "But here's what I've always wondered," Robert continued, his voice beginning to break. "How did you do it? How did you keep making music after losing John? How did you get up every morning knowing that your best friend, your creative partner, the person who understood your music better than anyone else, was gone forever?" The silence that followed was profound, broken only by the soft sounds of people in the audience beginning to cry. This wasn't just a question about grief. It was a question about survival, about finding the strength to continue when half of yourself has been torn away. Paul stared at Robert for a long moment, clearly struggling with something internal, some decision about how much to share, how much truth to reveal. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, stripped of all performance, all legendary status, carrying only raw human honesty. "Robert," Paul said softly, that's the question I've spent 44 years trying to answer." Without hesitation, without consulting producers or following any protocol, Paul McCartney stood up from his chair and walked directly into the audience toward Robert. "Robert," Paul said, his voice thick with emotion as he reached the man's row, "may I sit with you for a moment?" Robert nodded through his tears, and the surrounding audience members shifted to make room. Paul sat down beside him, both men now facing each other in this intimate moment. "You know," Paul began, his voice barely above a whisper, but picked up by the studio microphones, "I've never really talked about this publicly. Not the way you're asking. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Jimmy remained at his desk, understanding that this was no longer his show. The truth is, Robert," Paul continued, "I don't think I ever really got over it. Not completely. You don't get over losing someone like John. You just learn to carry it differently." Robert's eyes filled with fresh tears as he recognized the honesty in Paul's words. "After it happened," Paul said, "I wanted to disappear. I wanted to never make music again. John and I had been writing together since we were teenagers. When he died, it felt like half my musical soul had been ripped away. The audience was completely silent, many openly crying as they witnessed this unprecedented moment of vulnerability. But then I realized something, Paul continued. John wouldn't have wanted me to stop. He would have been furious if I'd let his death kill the music. A small smile crossed Paul's face, and Robert smiled through his tears as well. So, I kept making music, not despite losing John, but because I lost John. Every song became a way of keeping him alive. When I write a melody now, I still hear his voice. Paul pulled out his phone. I want to show you something I've never shown anyone publicly. He held up the phone so Robert could see. Though cameras couldn't capture the image clearly, Robert's sharp intake of breath suggested it was deeply personal. That's a photo of John and me writing in my music room, Paul explained. Taken just months before everything changed. We were laughing about some silly lyric. I keep that photo because it reminds me that the joy we shared was real. He took Robert's hand. Your friend David, how long ago did you lose him? 42 years, Robert replied. And you still think about him when you hear our music? Every single day, Robert said. We had plans to see you in concert. We'd bought tickets for your 1980 tour, but he got sick. Paul's expression softened. What was his favorite song? Here Comes the Sun, Robert replied immediately. He said it made him feel hopeful during treatment. Paul began to hum the melody softly, and Robert's face lit up. Soon, Paul was singing quietly, just for Robert. The studio audience joined in with gentle reverence. When the song ended, Paul looked directly at Robert. Your friend David is in that song now. Every time someone sings it, he's there too. Music makes everyone immortal. Paul stood up and removed his navy blazer. This jacket has been with me through countless interviews and concerts. Tonight, it goes home with someone who understands keeping a friendship alive through music. As Paul draped the jacket over Robert's shoulders, the older man looked transformed. And Robert, Paul continued. Asking me that question helped me realize something I've avoided for 44 years. I've spent so long trying to be strong that I forgot it's okay to grieve. Jimmy addressed both men. This is why music matters. The love, the friendship you shared, it lives on in everyone touched by your songs. Paul turned to the cameras. To anyone who's lost someone important, love doesn't end with death. It becomes memory, inspiration, the reason we keep going. The show ended differently that night. Just Paul and Jimmy sitting with Robert as credits rolled. Three men connected by understanding that some friendships transcend death. When the episode aired, it became the most watched Tonight Show segment in history. Robert became a grief advocate. Paul began acknowledging his grief more openly, and every time Paul performed songs he and John wrote, he thought about Robert Harrison and the night he admitted even Beatles break. The night that changed everything wasn't about music or fame. It was about two men who understood deepest friendships leave deepest wounds, and that greatest tribute is admitting how much we miss them. Love turned out to be all you needed, even when love meant living with broken hearts.